Greetings and welcome to Hexed Encountered. I'm Joe. In this video, we'll be doing a first look at the game Spring Prelude, Second Kharkov, May 1942. This is from Compass Games and is designed by Greg Blanchett. And got a little bit of a rip here in our shrink wrap, but that's okay because it's going to be coming off here in a moment. So this is based on the Victory in the West series from SPI way back in the day, and so you have variable combat strength for your units. So, quick overview. Now, you may be familiar with Greg Blanchett's other games that he's done at Compass, Fall Blau and Kharkov Battles, before and after Fall Blau. They go together. You can join them together. The Second Battle of Kharkov is in the Kharkov Battles game, but this one is slightly different treatment of it. So what we got in the box here is two 22 by 34-inch main maps, 3 counter sheets, which are 840 counters, half-inch size, a 28-page rule book, 10 player aids with various tracks, charts, tables, and scenario setups, 2 6-sided dice, and the box and its lid. Complexity is rated 5 or 6 out of 10, so not too bad. Your turn scale, or time scale rather, is 1 turn per day. Map is 1 hex is 3 miles. Unit scale for the Germans, it's regiments, and for the Soviets, divisions with brigades and battalions as needed. It is a 1 or 2 player game. Suitability for solitaire is high. Average time to play, 8 hours for the full campaign, 2 hours for the introductory campaign, and it is for 14 and up. There are 4 scenarios in here. The Northern Pincer, which uses a portion of a single map as an introduction to the full campaign. So this is the introductory scenario. Then we have the Izium Salient, which is full historical campaign covering both offensives as the battle flows back and forth. So this battle saw both sides on the offense and defense. So it's a good one to play for a 2-player game, because both players will get to be, they'll both get to attack and defend. So that's a good one. Then we have basically 2 ahistorical fictional situations. One, aggressive Timoshenko, that assumes the Soviets are ready to attack on the original planned kickoff date. And it plays the same as the historical campaign, but things are shifted 8 days earlier. The initial setup will be slightly modified, and some German reinforcements take longer to arrive. It is a 20-turn scenario from the 4th to the 23rd of May. You can see up here the historical scenario is from the 12th through the 27th and uses both maps. This uses both maps as well. And then the passive Timoshenko is kind of the other way, I guess, maybe, or different situation at least. This places the Soviets on a stronger footing. The scenario postulates that Timoshenko did not propose his attack plans to Stalin, and the headman himself was more occupied with other parts of the front. In this case, Fredericus is launched as planned by the Germans against a dug-in and defensive-minded Soviet force. Will there still be a pocket? This is 10 turns, 1 through 10, from the 18th to the 27th of May on the southern half of Map E. Okay, so up here it says this is a standalone game of the Second Battle of Kharkov from the 12th to the 27th of May, 1942. The failed Soviet offensive to recapture Kharkov and the subsequent German attack, which produced the last great pocket of Soviet prisoners during the spring of 1942. Players will conduct operations as either Soviet Direction Commander Timoshenko or the German commander of Army Group South, von Bock. The game utilizes the strength chit pull mechanics originally from the Victory in the West series and further refined in its VCS series descendants. New rules cover how rain, mud, and swollen rivers played their part in the beginning stages. Stacking rules use relative unit sizes, which are portrayed using white or gray dots. The addition of headquarters will allow Soviet command structure to feature in a more accurate way. Air missions are expanded to cover a few more options. Of course, what would the game be without Soviet doctrine restrictions? All right, so let's open this up. And, well, I can just pull on this, make it easy, right? Comes right off. So pull that off there and take the lid off. And we have 2 dice, 2d6, a black and a white. Then we have our packet with the counter sheets in them. As you can see, there are 3. Okay, we'll look into this in a little bit. Then we have some player aids. So we have player aids for the various scenarios. So this would be setups for scenario 2 and 3, which is the historical campaign and the first fictional campaign, or mission, scenario, however you want to look at it. Then you have scenario 2 and 3, Southern Front. You can see some differences here between, well, there are some, I guess. They look pretty similar, but I'm not going to go into in-depth checking that out here. Then we have scenario number 4. And then you have reinforcements for Soviets on scenarios 2 and 3. Here's our terrain effects chart. On this side, the CRT on this side. So you have your combat ratios, and then your defender's terrain. So the ratios are built into the terrain. So what's a 3-to-1 in a city or wooded marsh is 2-to-1 in woods, marsh, and 1-to-1 in clear. This is attacker to defender. Okay, defender shifts, air point, performing ground support, any defenders in a rubble hex, integrity bonus, artillery support, defender has CA with armor, and attacker has no armor or anti-tank. All units attacking across stream hex sides, and the air condition is rain. Those will shift things left, which benefits the defender. Attacker shifts right, air point, performing ground support, CA bonus, integrity bonus, artillery support, and surprise. There are, of course, notes here on the bottom for what's prohibited and not for your terrain effects chart, and it tells you which one uses which line on the CRT. So that's that. And then we have scenario 1 setup card. This would be the Germans. On the back, nothing. Then we have scenario 1 for the Soviets, also nothing on the back of that one. And we have our turn record track. Okay, and there's German setups here on the back. And we'll get to the rules in a minute. I'm kind of doing this in an opposite or a different order than I usually do. But here's scenarios 1 and 2. And then our hypotheticals 3 and 4. Total rain days, total May rain days, rain effects, mud effects, air and ground condition. Yep, that is single-sided. I was going to say, I'm sure that's single-sided. Here's Germans, scenarios 2 and 3 for reinforcements, variable reinforcement chart for both. And on this side, you have scenario number 4, German setup. Sorry, it's probably a little too high. Then we have scenarios 2 and 3. First Panzer Army and the 17th Army, and on this side again 2 and 3, 6th Army. Here we have our replacement and support point and victory point tracks, replacement pool, available air points, demolition table, and a cost for various actions here. Attack conducted, rebuild bridge, build entrenchment, air supply attempt, use infantry replacement point, use mechanized replacement point, Soviet HQ replaced. Okay, and then we have the Axis version of the same thing. So this would be replacement and support track and victory point track for the Axis side. So those are your 10 player aids. So here are the rules. Okay, rules are usually the first thing I do. Here it'll be the, I guess, second or third, depending on how you count. So as you'd expect, we start with a table of contents here. The rule book runs 24 pages, I believe. And so you can see here, basic intro, equipment and definition, setting up, sequence of play, weather, and then all the things that go through kind of the mechanics of the game. So start here, introduction, pretty much what you saw in the back of the box. Game equipment, so you have 2 game maps, as we also saw in the back of the box. Charts and tables goes through what each of those is. We already kind of saw those, so no need to recap. And then our pieces, and then over here we have unit types and symbols. Defines mechanized versus non-mechanized, and tanks, of course, would be included with the mechanized, all using the NATO symbology, so nothing that you wouldn't expect to see. And unit size, so units represented in this game cover a range from divisional to battalion, with artillery further grouped to portray a proper ratio of tubes between each side. If the unit size is in brackets, the counter represents more than one unit of that size, but is considered that size for game purposes. Unit will have a number of stacking dots, 0 to 3, as further indication of overall size. These can be black or white. Unit sizes from smallest to largest, you've got B for battalion, KG for Kampfgruppe, 3 for regiment, GP for group, the X brigade, double X division, so mostly what you would expect to see. And over here we have nationalities. So the Germans, there's the Axis, which includes Germany, Hungary, Romania, and Italy. And then, of course, the Soviets on the Allied side. So you have light gray for the German 6th Army, dark gray for the 17th Army, purple bar under their stacking dots is Hungarian, green bar Romanians, teal bar for the Slovaks, I forgot to mention those, and an orange bar for the Italian unit. All of these are considered Axis units. Soviet units are brown for the Southwestern Front or tan for the Southern Front. There are a bunch of markers. We'll see those when we go through the counter mix. A bunch of abbreviations. Most of them are fairly easy to remember. Nothing, I mean, you've got cadre units. HLC is the high level command. Most of these are pretty simple and easy to remember. Setup, you select the scenario, decide which optional rules to use. You have markers for air and ground, conditions, game turn indicator, support points, victory point totals, and they would be placed on the tracks of each player's player aid card at the start of the game according to scenario rules. Brown bridge markers are placed on corresponding bridges as shown on the maps. And then you've got units with VAR on the counter are placed aside and must wait for a specific turn to be brought into play. Those are reinforcements. This usually happens when the player makes the die roll for entry. Units with an asterisk next to their unit symbol are used if utilizing the Soviet high risk option or the Soviet player captures a city hex. Units have a specific color assigned to their symbol. For the Axis, this corresponds to their parent corps. For the Soviets, it corresponds to the parent army. While belonging to a white belongs to a higher level affiliation, and red are special optional commands. These colors only come into play during setup and under Rule 18 restrictions. Okay, sequence of play. So you got your preparation stage, your accounting phase, which the preparation phase is basically the weather. Then you have your accounting phase where you adjust your support points and victory point tracks by adding the SPs, support points, from the turn record track and counting victory points based on who's controlling what on the map. Multiple variable reinforcement segments. You would roll a die to release any reinforcements that are available as per the variable reinforcement chart. And then you've got a mutual air segment. The number of air points available is determined. Axis Soviet interdiction or paradrop, which is optional. Missions may be conducted. Then the Soviets go first. They have a replacement phase, which gets skipped when playing scenario 1. Well, they'll spend available replacement points on eligible, depleted, or eliminated units. You've got a movement phase where you can also, in addition to moving your units, you can start building entrenchments or repairing bridges. And your reinforcements may arrive and move on to the map. Then you have your combat phase. Combat may occur between adjacent units at the phasing player's discretion, so no mandatory combat. Supply phase, which you also skip on the first turn of any scenario because everyone is considered to be in supply. But during a regular turn after the first, you would be adjusting the current supply status of all your units. Then an engineering phase where they actually build and destroy bridges, build entrenchments, remove rubble, and assist units in river crossing. And the Axis does somewhat similar, mostly similar. They have one extra phase, right? So they have replacement, which works the same as the Soviet. Then you have your movement phase, which is the same thing, where they can do some engineering stuff to start building entrenchments or fixing bridges. They can all move. Reinforcements may arrive. Mechanized units can now be designated as reserves. That's a difference. Okay, combat phase is the same. Supply phase is the same. Exploitation phase is a new one that the Soviets do not have, and it's skipped on any rain turn. Designated reserve units may now be moved. Combat may take place between reserve units and adjacent enemy units at the phasing player's discretion. Then they also have their engineering phase that completes the turn. The turn markers moved forward one place. You remove your air points from the map if there are any, and play proceeds until the end of the scenario and a victor is declared. So weather, basically, you roll for the weather phase, you check for rain and assess ground conditions. If there's a continued rain marker, meaning you had rain the previous two turns, or the previous turn, I think it's 2 turns. A roll is not needed for this turn. The air conditions automatically clear, so you remove the continued rain marker, flip the air condition marker to indicate clear, and the ground condition remains mud, and you proceed to the accounting phase. So I won't go through this, but all of the mechanics for weather, it makes a lot of sense once you read it. In the entire game, the most you can have is 6 days of rain. Once that you have a rain days marker, once it reaches 6, no rolls are needed to be no rolls need to be made for the rest of the game. You always have clear. You can also elect to use the historical weather, which is marked on the turn record track, instead of rolling. So do you want dynamic weather or do you want the historical weather, basically, is what it boils down to. Effects of weather: when air conditions clear and ground is dry, there's no effect of weather, right? That is common sense, really. Rain stops all air supply drops, assisted river crossings, and air operations. They are not available during rain turn. Combat during a rain turn is automatically shifted 1 column to the left, so that would favor the defenders. And that is after all other shifts. Axis player cannot designate mobile reserves during a rain turn. Then you have effects of mud, halves your air point total. Non-mechanized units can't use strategic movement. All cavalry and bicycle units have a maximum movement allowance of 6. There's a mud column for mechanized units on the terrain effects chart. Marked stream hex size become swollen streams, and use that line on the terrain effects chart. And any advance after combat is limited to 2 hexes, no matter the actual length of retreat. Then there's an optional rule for spotter effects. So this would affect artillery. And again, it is optional, so you can elect to use it or not. You would have to roll a 1 to 4 on a d6 for it to be successful. A higher roll than 4 would indicate that it's ineffectual, off target, or possibly even friendly fire. Okay, zones of control. This is fairly straightforward, I believe. They have an effect on movement. If you move into a zone of control, you have to immediately stop. If they move out, they have to pay a disengagement cost, which is listed on the TEC. That cost is in addition to normal terrain cost, and you cannot move from one EZOC to another, and you have to exit to a non-enemy controlled hex. They may not enter another EZOC for the remainder of the current phase. So if you're disengaging from an enemy zone of control, you cannot end your move in another enemy zone of control. And you can't move through any because that would end your movement, so therefore you have to stay in friendly control or clear hexes that are clear of ZOC or friendly ZOC. German combat flexibility is an optional rule. So German mechanized units can move 1 or 2 hexes out of an EZOC directly into another EZOC if there's a friendly unit in both the start and end hexes. So if you have a friendly unit occupying them, you can shift your mechanized unit from one to the other, basically, as long as it's 1 or 2 hexes. That reflects that early in the battle, there's a note here, early in the battle, the 2 panzer divisions were able to rapidly shift their axis of attack from day to day. This rule adds the ability to accomplish this without the prior planning required with the base rules. Then you have zone of control effects on combat. So if you have to retreat through an EZOC, you lose a step for each controlled hex entered. Remember, this is a per stack and not per unit loss. So if you've got 3 units retreating, you only have to remove 1 step, not 3 steps. Not 1 from each unit, just 1 from the stack. When executing advances and retreats, friendly units have no effect on EZOC. They can only negate it when tracing supply. Speaking of, here's the supply rules. They are also pretty straightforward. Supply line is traced to a supply source of its nationality or to a supply road hex. A supply road hex is a road hex connected to a supply source by an uninterrupted string of road hexes that are free of EZOC, and none of which has suffered from bridge destruction. So you need bridges over any bridges need to be intact, and it has to be a road that is not affected by an EZOC along the entire course. Okay, for your unit, you can trace. You can be within 4 hexes to a supply road hex to be in supply, or 3 hexes direct to a supply source. When a supply line is traced to an HQ unit instead of a supply road, it's called a line of communications. All units are considered to be in supply on the turn of arrival or placement on the map. Supply status is not checked on the first turn of any scenario. All units are considered in supply. If you're out of supply, unit is out of supply if it can trace a supply line to a supply road hex or supply source, but the supply line is longer than permitted, or the supply road hex to which the line is traced is not connected to a friendly supply source, or it's unable to trace a supply line but is within 3 hexes of a friendly unit in supply. So you would be out of supply. It's not based on being within 3 units of a 3 hexes of a friendly unit. The effects of that: combat strength halved, defense strength is normal, or you round down on the halving. Mechanized units movement allowance is halved, round down. Non-mechanized units movement is normal because they don't burn fuel, I would assume. All units will have a maximum combat strength of 1. And then we have isolation, which is the next step up. So a unit is isolated if it is completely unable to trace through to a friendly supply source, and there is no friendly supplied combat unit within 3 hexes. So that's where that 3 hex friendly unit thing comes in, because if you're within 3 hexes of a friendly unit, you're not isolated. If you are isolated, then your maximum attacking combat strength is 1. There is an attrition attack for the Soviets that we will talk about later. Defending units are halved in strength, rounding down. Mechanized units have their movement allowance reduced to 4. Non-mechanized unit movement is halved, rounding down. And all units still get a minimum combat strength of 1. Starting with turn 11, you can have surrenders. A Soviet unit or stack with an isolated marker that's unable to trace a line of command to its parent HQ during the Soviet supply phase and is still in an isolated status must place a second marker. Units with 2 markers must make a 1d6 surrender roll. A result of 1 to 2 is no effect. 3 to 4 loses a step, and a 5-6, 2 steps are lost. Axis units will never surrender during the game. Here's the attrition attack. Soviet units which can only trace a line of command to an isolated Soviet HQ must move toward a friendly supply source in their movement phase and attack if possible. These attacks do not cost support points and may ignore command restrictions. Artillery units may still provide support. Supply sources, it tells you where they are. Basically, for the Germans or the Axis, they're on the edge of map W, southern and northern edges of map E, west of E3201. inclusive. Any German-controlled city is also a supply source. The Soviets can only use a road hex on the eastern and northern edges of map E between E4845 and E4001, inclusive. Air supply drops, you can use during the supply phase, you can use a support point to attempt to drop supply. It costs 1 support point from the HLC, which is higher level command, of the largest unit in the hex. 1 to 4 is successful if it's in an EZOC. If it's not in an EZOC, it's a 1 to 5 is successful. And you cannot attempt it during rainy weather. Now, support points. Both players have 2 high-level commands, the German armies and the Soviet fronts, that are used to track support points. Before the start of the game, support points are given to each HLC. As per the turn record tracker scenario rules, players may receive additional points during the game, also given on the turn record track. Once allotted to a specific HLC, a point may never be transferred to another. Support points are expended when attacks are made, special actions taken, and replacements taken. So special action would be something like the air supply drop. A listing of the cost per action is on the support point summary. There's a note here that basically says they pumped up the Soviet support point total for the game. If you're playing solo and you wanted to see or play with the actual historical ones, the Southwestern Front starts with 12 and the Southern Front starts with 2. And you would only add 8 SPs on turns 2 to 6, with the turn record track being accurate to use for remaining turns. So they did that because the Soviets hadn't really prepared for this attack. They got late approval. The Germans were already gearing up for Fall Blau, so they had stocked up and were getting ready to launch their offensive. But the Soviets beat them to it. However, they did it with a lower level of supply. The game actually improves their level of supply. Here are some headquarter counters. The Soviets have HQ counters. The Germans don't. They get 1 for each of their armies and 1 for Group Babkin. They represent a combination of the auxiliary HQ and stockpiles of supplies for offensive operations. It's not a combat unit, doesn't have a ZOC or a combat strength. If it's attacked, it defends with a combat strength of 1. If it's with a unit that gets eliminated, it also gets eliminated. And basically, you want to protect it by keeping it back off the line, is what most of this kind of boils down to. How do you expend support points? Various game actions require the expenditure of support points. It says, see the support point summary for the cost per use. They can only be used by units of that specific HLC. On the German side, if you have the 6th Army, you can use only units of the 6th Army can use its support points, and vice versa for the 16th, and the same for the Southwest Front and the Southern Front on the Soviet side. You gain points off the turn record track. And negative support, you can overspend, but if you do, your supply rating for all units immediately reduced by 1 level. So if you're in supply, you become out of supply. If you're out of supply, you become isolated. So that's something you probably want to avoid. Then you have air operations, and how that works. You can have air combat support, air interdiction. So interdiction is, if you're not familiar with that, it's it affects movement, enemy movement. So you put an interdiction marker on a hex, and it basically has a zone of control of the 6 hexes around it. And any movement through those hexes would cost an extra movement point above the normal cost. And through the center hex of that grouping, it would be 2 movement points. So units may not enter the interdicted hex or its adjacent hexes via strategic movement. And the movement stuff comes in over here. There's an optional rule for German paratroopers because there's debate about whether Soviet reports of German paratroopers dropping to reinforce besieged garrison of Ternavaya were accurate. For this rule, we assume the reports are true and the German can plan and execute. So you can drop 2 steps from the second Fallschirmjäger regiment. which starts as a cadre. If you don't, it remains it can be brought in later on as a reinforcement. Here we have rubble rules. If you attack a hex with air combat support, and it's a city hex or a town hex, it results in rubble. Rubble can be repaired by engineers. Any unit defending in a rubble hex gets a combat shift to the left. And it also adds a movement point to the cost of tactical movement, which is regular movement, basically. And we see that here in movement. You got tactical movement. It's the only type of movement allowed during the exploitation phase, which only applies to the Germans. You have your terrain costs. We kind of saw that on the terrain effects chart. Every hex will obviously have its own cost. Every unit has a movement allowance. You can move up to your movement allowance, just like in most games. So that's how tactical movement works. Another note is mechanized units going uphill from level 1 to level 2 will pay an extra 1 movement point unless they're on a road. Non-mechanized units actually don't pay that to go uphill because they're just marching, I guess. Strategic movement, faster type of movement can only be used far from enemy lines. You have to be at least 3 hexes from an enemy unit at all times during the phase, and reinforcements can enter via strategic movement as long as they meet the criteria of not coming within 3 hexes of an enemy unit at any time. Units crossing a hex side along a road ignore terrain costs and instead may use strategic road movement rate. Rail movement, there is no rail movement. All the rolling stock during the battle was used for bringing in reinforcements and supply, basically, on both sides. So you cannot use rail movement. There are railroads on the map. If you cross a rail bridge, it's treated as a regular bridge. Terrain effects on movement, that's on the terrain effects chart. You can't cross river or swollen stream hex sizes by artillery, and flak is considered artillery for this rule, and armor units unless there's a bridge. Dnieper River hex sides may not be crossed except at bridges. Universal movement restrictions, you can only use one type of movement, so you can't use tactical and strategic, mix them together. You can use one or the other. The southern map edge axis units can use strategic movements from any hex marked E to one marked X or vice versa off the southern map edge. This is the only way a unit may leave the map and return. Each unit that exits via one of these hexes will spend 1 complete turn off map. Following turn, it will enter the map as a normal reinforcement via one of the opposite labeled hexes. Then you've got mobile reserves. During clear turns, Axis mechanized units may move in either the movement phase or exploitation, but not both. Those units selected to use the exploitation phase are marked with a reserve marker during the movement and may be in an EZOC when marked. Reserves are limited to tactical movement during the exploitation phase. These units may never overstack during this movement or pass through a hex that is in an overstack condition. Only these units may participate in combat at the end of the exploitation phase, subject to normal stacking. Defending units may have already been attacked during the combat phase. All exploitation movement must be conducted before any combat is resolved. Then you remove any reserve marker from all units after completion of the exploitation phase. Right? So you pre-designate essentially your reserves, and then during exploitation, you can take advantage of any holes you may have opened up or weakening of the line, etc., in the preceding combat phase that precedes exploitation. Then stacking rules, you can have 6 stacking dots, which are either black or white, in one hex. It's enforced once during a player's turn at the end of the movement phase. If any stacks are in violation, the owning player must eliminate excess units. Markers and units without stacking dots do not count toward the limit. You can't stack enemy and friendly together. Maximum 1 HQ in a hex. Axis units can stack with, or may only stack with, or pass through a hex with units of their nationality and with German units. So you can't have Romanians and Hungarians together, but you can have Romanians or Hungarians together with the Germans, essentially, things like that. Overstacking, if you are forced to retreat onto friendly stacks in violation of the stacking limit, this is a temporary but allowed situation. If the stack is attacked in the same phase, the overstacked units do not take part in the new combat. If this attack results in any adverse result, the overstacked units are immediately, meaning the hex is left vacant through loss or retreat, the overstacked units are eliminated. Stacks must conform to the stacking rule by the end of the next friendly movement phase. So you have a temporary overstacking that you must take care of in your movement phase. Stacking in combat. Units with combinations up to a total of 4 stacking dots may participate in combat from a given hex. This applies whether attacking or defending. Units with a black stacking dot have the choice to participate in combat using only its cadre strength in order to fall under the limit of 4 or counted dots normally. Units without stacking dots may freely participate in combat from a hex. So basically that just limits how many units within a hex can contribute, probably along the lines of if a hex is crowded with forces, not all of them can be at the front. Some would be at the back, behind. So that's a reasonable rule, I would believe. Non-participating units within a stack may only contribute to integrity bonuses. Combined arms must come from participating units, but are also subject to the effects from combat results, including advance after combat, retreats, and leftover losses. This is important to remember even during the exploitation phase. Units participating in different combats while stacked in the same hex may not contribute integrity or combined arms. Bonuses to both combats are only subject to the effects from their participating combat results. So basically you can split your forces to attack 2 different hexes, but you lose the integrity bonus from them. So here's pretty much a big core of this system is the combat strength chits, size class. Unlike the smaller units in the game, prime units do not have their combat strength printed on the counter. When engaging in combat for the first time, these units use a randomly picked strength chit from either a red class or blue class, corresponding to the class color printed on the unit. It's in a box on the unit. Place the red class chits and the blue class chits into 2 opaque cups. Both sides share these chits, so it's not like red means Soviet and blue means German or anything like that. They both use both colors. So both sides share these chits and return spent chits to their cup for reuse. Once picked, place the chit under the unit to keep the exact strength unknown to your opponent. Red class represents the strongest and largest units, while the blue class is an average value in size and available support. Each unit's effectiveness rating, A, B, or C, equals the strength number used in calculating combat odds. A is highest, B is average, C is mediocre. These correspond to the quality of training and experience of the unit in combat. Strength chits are printed with a full strength, darker color with white values, here and here, as you can see, and a reduced strength, lighter color, these 2 with a black value side. Strength chits are only revealed immediately before combat resolution of a declared attack or defense after artillery or air points have been committed. Only prime units within the simulation require strength chits. All of the units use the printed number on the bottom left of the counter when calculating combat odds. These units usually only have 1 step. Most German battalions and Soviet regiments have two steps. When such a unit loses a step, flip it to its reduced or cadre side. Losses of 2 steps or an additional 1 step loss eliminates it. They cannot be replaced once eliminated. So you can use replacement points to replace a lost step, but once a unit's eliminated, you cannot do it. Cadre units. Cadre units are the last step in an organization. They represent the last trained remnants to survive combat losses. Formations that have 1 or more of their members at a cadre status are not eligible for integrity bonus. Cadre units don't exert a zone of control and have only 1 step with a fixed strength of 1. Then you have veteran units. Certain units on each side either previously contributed or during the battle showed exemplary combat performance to reflect their experience, their exceptional status rather. They are given an extra chance to draw a strong chit. Qualifying units have either a cross or a star next to their size. And size class effectiveness rating. When one of these units first enters combat, the owning player draws 2 chits and uses the higher strength value. The others return to the cup. More random chit use, an optional rule. To add to the uncertainty and random nature of the combat system in Spring Prelude, units should surrender all full-strength chits once every 4th turn in the accounting phase. Return these chits to the cups. And we have combat rules here. So you have terrain effects on combat. At the top of the CRT are lines that apply to the defender's terrain. Use the terrain in multi-hex attacks that is most favorable to the defender. Units defending solely behind river and or swollen stream hex sizes are doubled in combat strength. Units defending in a friendly entrenchment, not improved position, or in the town hexes are doubled in combat strength. Units in a friendly entrenchment, again, not IP, or town hexes normally doubled that defend solely behind river hex sizes have their combat strength tripled. No combat's allowed across the Dnieper unless it is crossed by a bridge. If all units attacking across the Dnieper hex sides via a bridge, the defender is tripled. If all units are attacking across stream hex sides, the defender receives a bonus shift to the left. Units defending in a village, town, or city hex may ignore 1 hex of any normal retreat result. Overrun results, however, may not be ignored. Any defending unit not in one of these types of hexes would still follow the combat results as normal. Also remember that this is optional and units may retreat anyway if so desired. If any units are defending in a friendly improved position hex, increase the combat strength of the hex by 2. This may not increase more than double, so a strength of 1 would not become 3, it would instead become 2. Mechanized units have their combat strength halved, round down, never below 1, when defending or attacking into a wooded marsh hex. Attacks out of a wooded marsh hex are conducted as normal. Entrenchments and improved positions printed on the map only benefit the side which built them. Then there's an optional rule for fort assault attrition. Attacks against defenders in an entrenchment but not improved positions are subject to a mandatory step loss if the defending stack elects to convert any retreat hexes into losses in order to remain in the hex. Multi-hex combat units may combine forces from 2 or more hexes to attack adjacent enemy units. Defenders must be totaled into one sum and may not be singled out of a hex. As long as the limit of 4 stacking dots per hex is not exceeded, more than one hex may be attacked from a single adjacent hex. If friendly units in one hex are attacking into more than one combat, all die rolls must be completed before any advance or retreat. The attacker decides the order in which results for each combat are applied. You can have screening forces as an optional rule. Units in an attack which have enemy units of 3 or more stacking dots in their zone of control, and those enemy units are not defending against other attacks, will only be able to attack at half strength, rounded up. Parent integrity, when all units, possibly 2, 3, or 4, depending on formation, with the same color stripe are adjacent to the defender in an attack, 1 integrity column shift to the right is awarded. Maximum of 2 such column shifts may be awarded for a single attack. Note, these do not need to be participating, merely adjacent to the defender. When 2 units belonging to the same color stripe are defending, either stacked together or adjacent to each other, i.e. they both do not have to be adjacent to the attacker, then 1 integrity column shift to the left is awarded. A maximum of 1 such shift may be awarded for a single defense. The requirements for integrity bonuses are checked at the moment of combat. Any members reduced to cadre or eliminated will negate integrity combat bonuses for that entire formation until those units are restored by later replacements. Attached units and parent formation units without a color stripe cannot establish unit integrity requirements, even if designated with parent identification. For example, some German regiments fought in the battle separated or without their full division and may not gain an integrity shift because they have no color stripe. And integrity shifts are cumulative with other shifts awarded. Note, German 71st Infantry Division can only meet integrity requirements on defense during scenarios 1 to 3. The 113th ID can only meet integrity requirements on defense during scenarios 2-3. However, in scenario 4, both have all 3 regiments and will act normally. Combined arms. Players organizing their units as cooperative combat teams are awarded shifts. Units attacking solely across river or swollen stream hex sides are never allowed a combined arms bonus. Entrenchments, but not improved positions, negate all combined arms shifts. Cadre units can only fulfill conditions as normal based on the role of their symbol. Combined arms in the attack. If the phasing player has armor units that are stacked with motorized infantry or foot, the attack is eligible for a combined arms shift. Each attacking combined arms stack provides a shift to the right, so you can have more than one. Combined arms defense consists of a motorized infantry or foot unit stacked with armor or anti-tank units. German flak units are considered anti-tank for combat purposes. A stack with combined arms defense negates all combined arms shifts by the attacker. So if both sides have it, you get no shifts. Combined arm defense that includes armor receives a shift to the left if defending against units that have no armor or anti-tank. Soviet tank brigade composition, another optional rule. Soviet tank brigades with a combat strength of 4 or more automatically qualify for combined arms. Okay. Tank brigade cadres are considered motorized infantry for purposes of the combined arms rule. Then you have artillery support. Artillery units may support combat in non-adjacent hexes within a range of 2, with 1 intervening hex between the 2 then. Of any defending hexes in these rules, this is called providing fire support or fire. Artillery may only fire twice per game turn, once during each player turn. After providing fire support, flip the artillery unit over to its fired side. Flip fired artillery back over at the end of each player turn. When providing fire support, artillery units provide column shifts equal to their fire combat strength number in a red circle. So in this case, it looks like a 1. This is true even if they are supporting any defending units. Maximum of 2 units, artillery units may provide fire support for attacks. Only 1 may support defense. Artillery that is adjacent to enemy combat units at the moment of combat may not provide fire support, but may use its combat strength in attack or defense as normal. Combat resolution. The attacker declares combat units involved, artillery and air points. Then the defender declares any artillery or air points to support his units. Next total the combat strength points by revealing chits or drawing new chits. After any adjustments, all individual units have a minimum combat strength of 1. Players compare total combat strengths, stating the attacker, then the defender total. As an example, attacker 20, defender 6, or 20 to 6. Divide the lower total into the higher and round off in favor of the defender. So 20 divided by 6 would be 3 to 1 odds. Use the odds column table. Use the odds column appropriate to the defender's terrain on the CRT. Any attacks made at ratios lower or higher than those printed on the CRT will use the lowest or highest ratio column. Makes sense. From this odds column, players apply any column shifts. Identical column shifts negate one another. Excess column shifts are applied to arrive at the final odds column. No ratio may ever be reduced voluntarily. So that's something that you are allowed to do in some games, but not in this one. The attacking player rolls 2d6 and determines the outcome of the combat by cross-indexing the roll with the final column. Apply results. Results after an A affect the attacking player's forces. D affects defender. Parenthesized numbers are mandatory loss requirements in steps. Numbers following the letter R are all retreat results in the number of hexes. Side that receives a result with an R is considered the loser. The other side is the victorious side. The losing side will always resolve their result first, then the victorious side. If any of the attacking units are armor units and an attacker loss is required, that first loss must come from an armored unit. If losses are required of a prime unit, its strength chit is flipped over to the reduced side for 1 step. The reduced strength chit is removed and the prime unit flipped over, revealing the cadre side for a 2nd step. The cadre unit is removed from the map for any 3rd step. Some lesser strength chits have a 0 combat strength on the reduced side. In this case, the prime unit is deemed to have only 2 steps of strength and is immediately flipped to its cadre side after 1 loss. You return the chit to its cup. Note, on a split A1 asterisk D1 result, if the defender's hex is left vacant and the attacker's force elects to take 2-step losses instead of just 1, an advance into the defender's hex is allowed even though there is no R result. Okay. Losses must first be taken from those units that actually participated in the combat. If there are not enough steps available among those units, only then may losses be taken from other units that are in the hex and not participating in a different combat. Retreats, they can be substituted with losses on a 1 step for 1 hex basis. There is an exception for overrun results over here. When a stack of unit retreats, move the entire stack. The retreat must be moved in hexes without entering the same hex twice, and the final hex of the retreat should be that number. Okay. You have priorities. They must satisfy for each retreat hex, enter a hex, an empty hex free of enemy zone of control, or a friendly occupied hex that is free of enemy zone of control, if not possible, into an enemy controlled hex at a cost of 1 step loss per stack for each hex entered. We already mentioned that. Whenever possible during retreats, a unit must choose a retreat path that leads back to the nearest friendly supply source. Soviet units may also use their same color symbol HQ unit to retreat towards in order to follow the first priority. Armor and artillery may not retreat across unbridged rivers. All other units may retreat across unbridged river hex sides. No unit may retreat off map. Retreating units may end up overstacked with friendly units. We saw that rule earlier. If the enemy stack's eliminated due to combat, the victorious units, yes, the defender may advance, may choose the path of retreat to use as if the eliminated stack had survived and retreated. So defenders can advance after combat. Then you have your rules for advance after combat. I won't read through all of those. Overrun results, red results on the CRT are overrun results, which allows the when that occurs, the attacker chooses the defender's path of retreat. The defender must retreat and cannot choose losses instead of retreating. If you get an overrun, you're basically shafted, I guess. Any retreated units lose their zone of control during the attacker's advance for that combat. Mechanized units can advance 1 hex further than under normal advance after combat rules, except for a mud turn. The engineering phase talks about Soviet bridge units, how to destroy a bridge. Any supplied combat unit can do that. Basically, you have to, a single bridge may never have more than 1 attempt against it. Single combat unit may attempt to destroy 2 different bridges per game turn. Bridges across streams and over the Dnieper can never be destroyed. Bridge building, we got some counters here. If an engineer unit begins its movement phase adjacent to a demolished bridge hex and there's no enemy unit also adjacent to either the engineer or the bridge hex, the engineer may rebuild the bridge. It remains in the hex for 2 friendly engineering phases and does not engage in any other activity. An engineer unit must be in supply to rebuild the bridge. Bridge building costs 1 support point, and Soviet engineer units must trace line of command, or communication rather, to place the bridge marker with the building side up and another building marker as a reminder. 1 support point is expended on the turn. The building markers are placed regardless of whether it's completed or not. On the immediately following friendly engineering phase, remove the reminder building marker. During the second phase, the bridge is complete. Flip the bridge marker over. Remove the bridge marker if an enemy unit moves adjacent before the bridge is rebuilt. Each side may rebuild a maximum of 2 blown bridges during the game. And we have rules for entrenchments and how you build those. Assisting river crossings. These are all things engineering units do. Removing rubble and a heavy weapons assault. If an engineer is present in a stack and is attacking an entrenchment, not improved positions, or a town or city hex, shift the column 1 to the right on the CRT. Only 1 such shift can be awarded. Reinforcement rules. You have scheduled and variable. The variable one you roll. And starting on the release turn given on the variable reinforcement chart, the owning player makes a die roll to see if the VAR group is available. If the roll is within the range, they are immediately placed at the location indicated and are treated as normal reinforcements. This turn, if they fail to arrive, continue rolling each turn until they do. If the group has an auto release, they will arrive automatically on that turn. Both players receive replacement points at the beginning of the game turns noted on the TRT, turn record track. Axis replacement points may only be used for German units. Replacement points may be saved for use on later turns. Following German units never qualify to receive replacements: the 912th and 920th Engineer or Pioneer Regiment, 2nd Fallschirmjäger Regiment, 375 454S Infantry Regiment, and the 610 213 Infantry Regiment. Units adjacent to enemy units out of supply or isolated may not receive replacements. Units that have received air supply may not receive replacements. Replacement point use. You can expend 1 mechanized RP to flip a tank battalion, reduce tank battalion to full strength, restore to full strength a motorized infantry regiment or tank brigade that is reduced, and place the strength chit back in the pool. Restore cadre to a reduced strength motorized infantry regiment or tank brigade. Return an eliminated motorized infantry regiment or tank brigade to the map as a cadre unit in a supplied town closest to divisional army members and at least 3 hexes away from enemy units. By expending 1 infantry RP, a player may do one of the following: restore to full strength an infantry regiment or division that is reduced, placing the strength chit back in the pool. Restore an infantry cadre to a reduced strength regiment or division. Draw a chit and place under unit on reduced side. Return an eliminated infantry regiment or division to the map as a cadre unit in a supplied town closest to divisional army members. When a player spends a replacement point, see the support point summary for appropriate cost from the respective HLC. Axis expenditure of mechanized replacement points also costs victory points as per the victory point schedule. If a side has no engineer units on the map, one can be returned from the eliminated units at the cost of 1 infantry replacement point placed according to the infantry RP rules above. Then you've got some historical Soviet command and doctrine restrictions, lack of tactical flexibility. Each attacked Soviet player makes must have all units with the same color symbols or combined with white symbol units. This includes any artillery units providing fire support. Hesitation and indecision. Soviet units which have a highlighted setup hex on the setup chart were delayed in deploying to the actual battle by the commanders. Place do not move markers on each of these units corresponding to the turn indicated on the setup chart. Will not perform any function until one of the following happens: start of their turn, designated turn, unit itself is attacked by an Axis unit, a unit of the Southern Front HLC is attacked. So these would all be Southern Front units, I'm guessing. Any attack on a Soviet unit in a Soviet entrenchment hex east of the Donets. When triggered by A, they are individually released, or when triggered by B through D, all are released. We move the marker and they begin functioning normally. Southern Front unpreparedness. Soviet units of the 9th and 57th Armies, Southern Front HLC, gray and light blue, are considered inactive and may not move to attack until one of them is attacked. Flip these 2 HQ units to their inactive side as a reminder. From the instant a SF unit is attacked, Southern Front, all Southern Front units may then operate normally for the rest of the game. Additional strength support points received each turn may be given only to the Southwestern Front until Southern Front armies are released. From then until the end of the game, Soviet player may freely distribute support points between the 2. Soviet tank doctrine infancy. At this stage of the war, Soviet tanks were still mostly used alone or thinly mixed with infantry defense. Rarely did they employ proper combined arms techniques as the Germans had mastered. So the Soviets are limited to only 1 combined arms bonus per attack, no matter how many Soviet stacks qualify. And the Soviet player cannot designate any reserve units. Then we have special conditions. Given the limitation of scale, only the portion of the USSR covered by the battle is shown on the maps. Therefore, it must be noted that each side's front line continues north and south. To simulate this connection in scenarios 2 and 3, players must maintain a friendly ZOC on at least one hex along the north map edge and east map edge, south of including E4848 for the Axis, north of and including E4847 for the Soviets. If a player cannot maintain control of an edge hex for 2 consecutive turns, final victory level should be shifted 1 level in favor of the opposing player. This requirement is waived during scenarios 1 and 4. And you've got your default victory conditions. We'll talk about this when we do gameplay scenarios. So the scenarios that we can play, we saw them on the back of the box at the very beginning of the video. Northern Pincer, this is the introduction to the game. This is probably the one I will play for the gameplay video, because I just want to show the game being played, not necessarily the full-blown, fairly large game that this is. So it gives you your initial deployment. It only uses map E. It gives you your setup. It's a 6-turn scenario. Lists your supply sources, your special rules. And again, we'll go over this when we play. Then you have an Izium Salient. This is the full historical campaign. Initial deployments on E and W. And the duration for the battle version is 1 to 10. For the campaign version, 1 to 16. Then you have the 2 fictionals, one aggressive Timoshenko and the other passive Timoshenko. Then you've got game notes for the Soviets, for the Axis, and our designer notes. And again, the rules, the development and the design were both done by Greg Blanchett. Edmund Hudson did the maps. Final artwork by Ilya Kudryasov. And vassal module by Greg Blanchett. List of the testers, and a special thanks to Nathan Kilgore for the base VCS system from which this was derived. And on the back, you've got your game turn outline. All right, now let's take a look at the map here, and this would be map W, I'm pretty sure. I'll probably show these separately because of the size of them. Okay, so this is map W, and you can see the main city on here is Poltava in the north. But yeah, so this is the western side. Obviously, that's what map W means. You have your victory point schedule, victory level schedule, unit explanations up here. So you can look at your counters and see what they mean. Here's our terrain key, so we can tell what terrain we're looking at. Then if we go up this way, here, this is the bottom half, right here. So it goes all the way down here to the bottom of the, well, you got Dnipropetrovsk down here. I try to say that too fast. It's at the very bottom of the map. It is right there. Okay, so that is your very bottom end down there. You've got Pavlovgrad over here. And Dnipro-Dzhinsk. I guess that's probably not right, but it's the best I can do. Okay, so let's fold this guy up and get map E out. And this is the eastern half. Here. Okay, so this is the eastern half, map E. So you got Belgorod up here at the top. Then we have Kharkov. All right, that's the main one. You can see this is a, 6 hex city. So fairly large city for this. And we've got some rivers here as well. And you can see over here, maybe, I hope, right here, there's red lettering. These are supply sources, I think, at the map edge for the RKKA, which is the Red Army, SWF, Southwestern Front. Then down further, we have the Southern Front area. Down here, this is the Southern Front. So you got Southern Front, and Southern Front down here at the bottom. Yeah, there's not a lot of like settled city areas down towards the bottom half of this guy. But this is pure map, and this is the map that we would be using if we played scenario 1, which is my plan. I'll probably turn it sideways, so it would be more aligned in this direction, where you can actually I can get the whole thing in here. So this is probably the format I'll actually play it in. And so there's your look at the maps. Now we also have our counters here. So we'll just take a look at the counters without, well, I guess I'll open them up. So you can see this is 6th Army on this side. The lighter gray, the darker gray is the 17th Army. These are Germans, obviously. Okay, so if we get nice and close here, you can see the letters for variable strength. You have a blue A here. You have a red C, red B. Do we have any red A's? Yes, we do down here. 3rd Panzer, I think, 3P, A12. And you can see it also says VAR. It's very kind of hard to see, but it says VAR there on the side. These are small. They're 1/2 inch, so they're on the smaller side. There are a lot of them. Several sheets worth. So that's the 6th Army. So this 6th and 17th Army, sheet 1 of 3, the Germans. Okay, and these pop out really easy. They're like almost popping out as I'm just trying to hold them here. So here we have the Soviets, Southwestern Front and the Southern Front, along with some markers. These are the turn markers for the units that are inactive. You can't do anything at the start. You've got rubble, rubble repair, rubble removal, and some out of supply down here, your zone of control, support points for the Southwestern Front. You've got victory points over here as well. And then also some variable strength units for the Soviets. Here's an A right here. And here's some armor with Bs. These are blue Bs, so not quite as good as the As. Of course, this was only 42, so the Soviets had not really gotten their war machine in gear yet. They were still kind of recovering and adapting to the realities of fighting the Germans. And here are our variable strength chits. So here are blue, and dark red on the main side with white lettering. So this is full strength side. This is reduced strength side with the black, lighter with a different, more muted coloring, and a dark and a black, basically, font face. And you can see the numbers are lower in general. And then, of course, we have victory point control hex markers here with the hex number up here. So E2406 on the map, that would be 2406. 24 is here, 06 is up here. So that's Miko Yanovka. Okay. And again, some markers, right? Some out of supply, more victory point markers, and so on. On the back of the out of supply, you have isolated. So these are what the isolated markers look at. And again, this is just the back side of markers. Here's some bridges being built. And that is the look at the counter. So that wraps up our look here at Spring Prelude. So looking forward to trying this. I have both Fall Blau and Kharkov battles, which are also designed by Greg Blanchett, and I would love to do something on those. The monsterish size of those has kind of prevented me from going into them, but I will endeavor to do so at some point. Hopefully not too long. I have so many games I want to play and only so much time. But This has been an extremely long first look, probably the longest one I've ever done because of the rules overview. So I'm going to sign off now. I hope you enjoyed it, found it useful. I will probably put a table of contents into the video description so you can skip around. You don't have to watch the entire rules overview. If all you want to see is the components, that would be, ridiculous, I guess. But if you did watch the whole thing, thanks. You get kudos from me for that. Please consider liking, sharing, and or subscribing. If you have any questions or comments, put them in the old comment section. I'll do my best to reply. That is going to do it for this one. I need a drink. I've been talking for a long time, so I'm going to sign off. This is Joe. This is also the Hexed Encounter channel. And until next time, as always, happy gaming.